I'm going to sit down. You'll make me stand up again. Just let them take a seat, sorry. I'm sorry I've waited till you all sat down to ask you to stand. Would you please stand? Welcome to this ordinary meeting of Huntersville Council number 4450. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and the waters that surround us, and I pay my respect to their elders past and present.
We thank you, Lord, for the honour of being called by our fellow citizens to this office of honour and trust. Give us grace, diligently and honourably, free from private interest or prejudice, to discharge the duties entrusted to us, to the common good and in your sight, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you. Please have a seat. I don't think we have any apologies tonight. Everybody seems to have been able to attend. Are there any declarations of interest? Set of minutes there, previous meeting. Councillor Williams?
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to move those minutes with a correction.
Yes?
I've got some questions.
Would you like to give us your correction?
Page 1, 322/18, in recording the voting for the Deputy Mayor, it seems to have included Councillor McLaughlin, who was not present. It should read Councillor Collins.
All right, thank you. We'll amend that. And questions?
Yep. It relates to 33/7/18, the improvement of traffic flow along Ryde Road, Luxon Road, and Street to Pittwater Road. I'm just wondering what the logic is in relation to Mark and Mary Street traffic parking, in particular the pedestrian crossing proposal. Council has already placed counters in the street at a time when the college is not at its full complement. So I'm just wondering how we'll get some significant results from that, considering Year 12 is now left, and that's about 200 students and 200 parents' cars not in the area. So I'd question the value in doing that work at this stage. I'd wait till the new year. In relation to my question 13.3, the routes obstructing the footpath at 50 Mary Street. I've read the confidential note from the planning officer, and I acknowledge that's in there, but I think it's pretty mean-spirited of council and would show a lot of goodwill after a long and protracted issue to just remove those routes. They were from the council's trees. They are blocking the footpath, and it wouldn't take much effort to do. So I'd seek council's support to just finalise that matter. In 13.5, my question on notice, without notice, on Parramatta River Catchment Group Master Plan, as it's indicated there, is quite an outstanding outcome, and I do acknowledge the answer that can't be, the briefing can't be taken to next year to hear all about the wonderful things happening with the Parramatta River and the collaboration between the 11 councils and 6 government agencies, which is outstanding. But my further point is that it says here available time within the councillor's workshop and briefing schedule. I would have hoped that would include the community. Is that the intent with that? Because our council briefings do exclude the community in that process.
Yes, should.
So it should include the community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are a couple of issues I'd like to raise for the minutes as well. We were briefed by Mr. Witters last meeting, and he apparently tried to make an appointment and was not able to. Unfortunately, we got an email from him this morning. I wonder whether we can get an appointment fixed up so we can sort that one out. The next one.
And we're aware of that, and the General Manager's aware of that too.
Good, thank you. Next one I was going to raise is, I had a question to do with the progress on Prince Edward Street, Gladesville. The question talks, or the answer talks about the traffic consultant's report being finalised, but there's no time frame. Could we possibly get a time frame on that? The other question I asked at the end of the last meeting was the Local Air Traffic Committee and the appropriate code of meeting practice. It's come back, as I thought, as being our council code of meeting practice, which would entitle councillors to attend and speak at those meetings. So I hope that in the future that will occur. I think that's it, unless we need a motion in terms of having the routes removed from number 50 Mary Street. All that just happened.
I'll take it on notice at the moment.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions or clarifications? So, move Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Sanderson, with the amendments and notes taken tonight. All in favour? That's carried. Councillors, could I suggest we bring forward item 8.1, please? Councillor Miles, Councillor McLaughlin. Thank you. Would you like to? Oh, no, sorry. Should we go to the item 8.1 first? Should we start with that one? We'll deal with that one at the end. Or? Okay. So 8.1 is financial reports for the period ending 30th of June 2018, and if I can invite Mr. Dagger to come up, that would be great. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. I'm pleased to report that the annual financial statements have been drawn up in accordance with the relevant legislation, including the Local Government Act and regulations, and of course Australian accounting standards. All information required throughout the audit was received, and the Audit Office of New South Wales issued their audit reports on the 19th of October, and they're unqualified audit reports. Just briefly, Council's financial results include the following. An operating deficit for the year of $9,000 compared to $486,000 in the previous year. Regarding the statement of performance indicators, this council met all of the performance indicators, the benchmarks for the industry, apart from the operating performance ratio, that all other 5 indicators were met. Just briefly, council's unrestricted current ratio stood at 8.7 to 1, and this means that for every dollar it owed, council had $8.70 to cover it. The rates outstanding at the end of the year slightly decreased from the previous year, which is a good result. It was only 2.5% at the end of the year. The buildings and infrastructure ratio, renewals ratio I should say, that's sort of 36% for the year, and that's disclosed in Special Schedule 7 financial statements. The benchmark there is 100%, so this is one of the other indicators the council didn't meet for the year. In concluding, I'd just like to thank the staff for their cooperation throughout the audit, but I'm happy to take any questions regarding the audit process.
Thank you very much, councillors. Do you have any questions of the auditor?
Oh, one question.
Councillor Collins?
Sorry, through Mr. Mayor, are you from the Auditor General's office?
No, so I'm a contract audit agent on behalf of the Auditor General. The director in charge of this audit sends her apologies, but she has a conflicting engagement.
Fantastic, thank you.
All right, so the recommendation that is at the bottom of page 88, move Councillor Williams, second Councillor Sanderson. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'd like to go back to 2.1 and Nelson Parade upgrade. And normally we deal with the mayoral minute. I'd like to leave the mayoral minute aside for the moment and go straight to the speakers. Oh no, sorry, we have one more thing we need to do first. We've got a late item. I'm sorry, we've got a late item. Move Councillor Miles. Thank you, Councillor Miles, for reminding me. And Councillor McLaughlin. Got that? Thank you. So there's a late item which deals with the Nelson Parade and the legal matters on Nelson Parade. And we have our legal team here. Thank you. John Collins.
John Cole.
John Collins. Thank you. Thank you. Do you have copies of the lay report? Do we distribute those? Right, good. So I'll ask John Cole, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, John Cole's my name. I'm a partner of HWL Ebsworth Law Firm. Phil Brown's a senior person, general counsel with me. We've had a look at this matter of the 149 certificates, in particular 149.5 information for council, and there's some legal advice that obviously it's professional privileged, which we've provided, which is behind the GM's approach that's been looked at the moment. With this, I try to tack a line between not breaching privilege and between putting information out there as of assistance. I think, in summary, Section 149.2, which is the old section most people will remember, is now 10.7, sub 2, and that says that in giving 149 certificates, councils must do something. In relation to 149.5s or 10.75s, there's a discretion given to councils in what they put on those certificates and what they don't, and it may do that, put material on it, not put material on it, so it's a discretion. Now, it's no secret to everybody that there's been lots of reports about Nelson Parade and Gladstone Parade and the properties down there over a number of years. The Parsons Brickendorf report also, I think no secret, proposes some works and site works be carried out on certain sites. If I could just approach, if we could have the sites up there that... Sorry, that's it. Yeah. Again, here, the government, which is probably those that are interested in this issue are aware, and this, and then there's two other blocks down here where the reclamation, 7, 9, 11, and two other blocks here. These blocks down here are subject to a notation about them being significantly contaminated, not these blocks up here. The other blocks, 5, 13 and 15, have in the Parsons Brickendorf report what I've referred to as hotspots, but they've identified some areas, which are the purple dots, which are suggested to have works carried out or site works carried out on them. Now, so far as the sites in the area, you've got what I'm referring to here as the government sites, which are these 3 or 5 sites. These are the private sites that are identified in the report, and then there's a number of other sites in the area. In relation to the other sites in the area, there's various references to those sites in reports, and again, they're all on matter of public record. There's nothing in relation to those sites in the reports that suggests that works are being required to be carried out in relation to those and contamination issues. Now, the department also has guidelines, Department of Planning, which suggest or that note that reports relevant to a site can be, or it suggests that they're referred to in the 149.5 or the 10.75 information that's discretionary from council. Now, where it's got up to on this one, that we understand after legal advice, which is privileged, as I said, from both us and from the council's insurers, the GM has determined to put the suggested notation, which I think we've got that up there as well, which is that notation on the government sites and also on the private sites with the purple dots that I showed before. Now, that would then leave the historical position, which the council has followed, of not putting any notation on all other sites, which may or may not have been mentioned in other reports, that's generally out there. And as you can appreciate, the council's got to balance its legal obligations, its legal discretions, its discretions and obligations to the community as well. And that's, as I understand it, the position that's been put forward at the moment. Thank you.
Okay. Councillors, do you have any questions of Mr. Cole? Anything you'd like to clarify? Councillor Miles.
Could I just have the map up again for a moment? Sorry. The map with the hatchings. Apologies. So my understanding is that this addition would have been relevant to the government sites that are hatched in yellow because it met a certain criteria, and the purpose for broadening that is essentially to recognise that there are those hotspots that are coloured in purple. If there was remediation on those hotspots in purple, is there anything that would impede council removing this notation on the certificates?
Yep. I think that the difference with the difference between these two and these three at the moment is there is, as you say, a technical definition of significantly contaminated sites. And it's only these that meet that definition without going through the legalities of why they meet that definition. And I think at the moment it actually picks up that these sites have got that on it as well, and we don't think that's right. We think those sites should be just subject to the 149.5 notation. But if these sites were cleaned up and that material was removed, whether encapsulated or taken away or whatever, then the council would have available to it the discretion to be the same as the other sites in the area. I know this site is, because of the history of it and going back to the early 1900s and radium and all the rest of it, it's probably right up there in sites that are known. I mean, I've known about it probably for 40 years living in the area. But effectively, if a site gets remediated, it's the same as a service station site or a contaminated site that gets remediated. And it then would be in the same position as other sites in the area. They're in the area where there's been known contamination on other sites. But if somebody specifically asks for a 149.5 information in relation to that site, then the report at the moment, and again I'll be careful not to breach privilege, but the position taken by the council or the GM at the moment is that we're aware that for those three private sites, certain works have been recommended. Once those works have been carried out, those sites would then flop into the same as the other sites. It would then again be within council's discretion to put them in with the other sites. I'm not saying that would be the same if the material stayed on the government sites, because obviously that would be something that would still be something that should be on the title. Yep.
So were there to be, as has been suggested, that this encapsulation on the government side, that wouldn't impede the potential removal of this notation from the 149.5 certificates?
Wouldn't impede it.
No.
In terms of
that notation would remain on the government-owned sites.
But let me say this, because in 149.5 it's a discretion of the council, if those sites were remediated, then it's within council's discretion to say we're going to deal with them the same as other private sites in the area. But there's a difference between picking it up and removing it and encapsulating it in terms of going forward what you say about that site, because what you'd be aware there, it's the same as a service station which has been cleaned up or a service station site that's been encapsulated. I've seen sites that are encapsulated, they still allow residential development and other sorts of things on them, but those sites still have a report dating back which says this was contaminated, which council would be well advised to be still telling people about as compared to the other situation. So that's two different situations, and it's up to the discretion to be exercised and can be exercised differently in relation to them.
Councillor Sanderson.
I presume in the process of getting those sites to a state where a 149 or 10.7 certificate can be issued, that would also involve, pretty significant testing in order to be absolutely certain that those sites were clear.
Certainly, if there's any, and this is the Contaminated Land Management Act goes through quite significant legal steps and processes which you've got to do to certify land as being able to be properly used for and has been clean, inverted commas. So any remediation works that were carried out or site works carried out to remediate that would have to be done by proper people and would have to have people with far greater expertise and knowledge than Phil or I of this, and they'd have to come back and they'd have to certify. But once those experts, same as council relies on expert noise advisors and traffic engineers and town planners, etc., once those experts came back and said, this is our professional view on it, which should be done as part of the certification following remediation, then council would be entitled to rely on those reports.
Councillor Sanderson, do you still have a question? Any further?
Right for the time
Councillor
being.
Williams?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Just following on from Councillor Miles' question, if those sites 5, 13 and 15 have the contamination removed from them, and if it is then, for want of a better word, encapsulated on 7, 9 or 11, those sites 7, 9, 11 would still require notification under the 10.7.
Still say that the notification that's on there is to say these reports exist.
Right.
And we would recommend.
So the stigma still remains in the street.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But we would think that the prudent action would be to still keep the notification on those sites, even if it's been encapsulated, because council is aware that there are reports around that say this happened on that site. That happening on that site means it may be certified as clean for certain uses and not be a problem, but it's still historically a record that's there and would be wise to still keep that on there, which is a different scenario to the other sites which wouldn't have that same situation.
So the certificate still would remain on those sites.
Well, it's a discretion. It's up to the council, as I said in 149.5. That's an available option. If you were looking at what would be prudent, then it would be prudent, in my view, without trying to breach privileges to what the view is, to still keep that on that site. But again, that's a matter that would be dealt with at the time, depending on what works were carried out, depending on the remediation that happened.
All other options, they've looked at old mine sites, country areas, and they were asking everyone in the street to give them possible solutions, and I believe they were certainly following everything up, because I believe they're also desperate for a solution. So we found them to be very easy to deal with and very supportive.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mercer, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, my name's Rosemary Manusa and I've lived at number 15 Nelson Parade for 53 years. The main reason for wanting to speak tonight is so that you can be fully informed of the true position of the Nelson Parade residents, 2 families, who actually have contamination on their properties and live next door to number 11, which emits some of the worst contaminants. We are not represented by NPAG, which is now only interested in complete removal from the site, and the HEC group represents the wider Hunters Hill community and so are neutral as to the solution. Philippa has worked long and hard to get a Nelson Parade cleaner, but unfortunately for us, she's not willing to admit that the solution of complete removal from the site, which is what in a perfect world we would all accept as the only solution, is not currently feasible. This is due to the ongoing political situation. Kemps Creek, the only facility licensed to take our contaminated wastes, refuses to do so. And the good question is, how on earth is this allowed to happen? But that has been the situation we have been faced with for 20 odd years. So being realists, we know if we don't want the government to just walk away from, and I'm using their words, unreasonable whinging Nelson Parade residents, we have to be prepared to look at all alternative clean-up offers the government makes. And that is what the government and state properties with experts and ANSTO are currently working on. And once they have done all their tests, they will draw up proposals and plans for remediation. Nelson Parade residents will then be able to have the input into final plans. And Philippa warned residents, this was in a TWT thing, who supported the concrete bunker proposal that will not ensure their safety and their homes. This is very one-sided. Philippa has shown no concern for those of us living with and next door to the contaminants. Does she really believe that we are under no risk now, but that encapsulation, which will be done under ANSTO's standards and signed off by them, will not be a lot healthier and safer for us? And then also the type of contamination is also played up to make it sound worse than it actually is. It's naturally occurring radioactive material, or NORM, and it has been mentioned that the venting encapsulation bunker would spread radon contamination all over Nelson Parade. This is completely incorrect, as the experts at the meeting on the 4th of August have told us that radon gas breaks down to non-toxic once it goes into the air. So air from any vent is not a health hazard. Also, the vent would not be discernible because it would be hidden in something like a street light. And my main reason for concern over the clean-up delay is my ever-increasing age. My need to be able to sell, to downsize as my health deteriorates. I don't have another 10, 20 years because I don't want to have to put the stress on my family that I had when I couldn't sell and my husband needed to go into a nursing home and I couldn't sell, I couldn't raise money. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, ladies. Councillors, are there any questions of the speakers, please? Councillor Miles.
Obviously, this late item, which you may not have had a chance to look at, deals directly with both of your properties, 2 of the 3 properties that will be affected. Do you have any thoughts or comments on that, given that that's on the table tonight? Obviously, the advice we've received from our lawyers is that that is a requirement, that is stated on your certificates, and as unfortunate as it is.
I mean, we have contamination on our block. We currently can't sell, so at the moment it doesn't matter. But it's great for the rest of the street. It clears the issue up for them, and hopefully that'll allow some of them to sell. And hopefully, if all this gets cleaned up, that will move off our title.
And I think didn't the lawyers say that after it was all cleared up, they could do another check and ours could perhaps be...
Yes.
That's correct.
Yes, that's correct.
So,
But it still remains on those government-owned sites, so your neighbour would have that.
but it's already industrial waste, and so then it will be made to residential standard. That's got to be better.
Yeah.
I mean, we can
Councillor Williams, do you have some
negative.
questions, Councillor Williams?
Oh, just that. How do you feel about that situation after encapsulation? That your neighbouring property, where the encapsulation is, will still have it on its title. Do you think that would have any effect on your property having a
Not
title
once the
next
stigma
door?
goes and it settles down a bit, I don't think so.
And certainly the way my husband and I have looked at it, 70 or 80% of something is better than nothing of something. And at the moment we've got nothing. We can't sell. We've got 2 blocks within our family that we cannot sell.
You can't even borrow money against it.
And so, if the neighbouring block has a notation on it, well then our blocks are clean, but then we can at least move forward.
Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Cresswell?
Thank you. Thanks everyone for speaking so far tonight. In your private meetings with Property New South Wales, which you've had as well, right?
Yes.
So if you don't want to discuss, that's fine. Did they assure you that in this next design phase and going forward, and I assume you asked them as well, what happens if down the track we find out that radon gas, which what you've said is correct, it does dissipate within a metre of hitting the air. What happens if down the track we find out something worse about it? Have they suggested that the encapsulation will still be done in a temporary fashion so that it can then be taken away? Or are they, do you understand what I'm saying? What have they promised you as far as monitoring?
They haven't made any promises because at the moment they have to do those tests. They have to make sure that the rock's safe. They have to make sure, that the stuff is safe to put into a cell. So they
can dig deep
they
enough or
actually,
whatever.
like, we're not at that stage for anything, but they did say that what they would like to do is to store it in bulker bags. So because they'd have to remove it off the ground to dig the cell, so they will put it into some sort of bulker bags, dig down into the ground, build the cell, and then put the stuff in the bulker bag. So in theory, in future, it could be removed. And they did say, I believe it will be the New South Wales government that monitors the site. And so, if something like that, they do find down the track that it is a problem, well then they would
They will be maintaining the site for the rest of its.
And can they say if they find down the track that it's a problem, it's a bigger problem now while it's, out in the open?
Councillors, any further questions? Thank you very much, ladies. The next speaker is Mr. McGlynn.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm at number 3 Nelson Parade, so I'm one house away from the contaminated site. Tonight I'm speaking as a resident, although I'm on both committees of HEG and NPAC that have previously spoken. Quick comment on the discussion on safety. Both groups are absolutely committed on safety. I'm not saying any deviation on that, and I've made most of the meetings. The proposal that we've got is that there's 3 contaminants on the site, which I think you're already aware. They're heavy metals and hydrocarbons near the water, which is under an EPA order, and fulfilling the EPA order means those 2 need to be removed, which we understand is happening. The remaining material is the radioactive material, where the readings are sufficiently low that they don't trigger an EPA requirement. This is the material that we have a problem with in the street. The proposal that we've been given is to construct a cell, and this is well-established technology. It's a concrete bunker, basically. They normally have a minimum design life of 100 years, and they're not temporary. When they go in, they stay there. They require ongoing monitoring and management for the entire cell's life, so there's follow-up required. Of course, in our case, it's radioactive material going in. Radon gas is going to be emitted to the atmosphere. This requires specific monitoring, and it's a more complex design cell than you would use for a normal toxin. Again, the discussion from previously, radon gas breaks down within 48 hours, so it breaks down quite rapidly once exposed to the atmosphere. In discussion with New South Wales Property, they're initially going to allow natural ventilation. In more detailed questioning, they're now examining, and they're going to engage some consultants to do a modelling exercise on how to do it. It requires ventilation stacks. They're typically 5 metres high or more, and a number of them depending on the size of the cell. So basically, as a street, we've been given this sort of one option of a cell with the comment of take it or leave it. They're gone into detailed design. We received a letter indicating they're going into this detailed design, and we're able to give input on the design of the on-site cell. So we're not on board with wanting a cell on the street, but that's the input. So it's really a one-solution model.
Move to stand Councillor Williams and Councillor Miles, thank you.
The alternatives exist, and the answer is yes, plenty. There's sites in Queensland that can take restricted solid waste and that can go there. In Australia, there's temporary storage. There's over 100 sites that store radioactive material right now. every single one of them is a temporary storage facility waiting for government approval of the permanent site. This includes Lucas Heights. I have a bit of trouble believing that they cannot find in Australia an alternative site for this material rather than to leave it in a residential street. Another alternative that's been looked at is this national repository for radioactive material. This chestnut's been going for about 40 years. However, there's been some recent developments in that area because they've changed their approach to the problem. In the past, they've located many suitable sites and then asked the locals for permission, who really have all said no. In Europe, with a much larger radioactive problem, they've resorted to a time-honoured solution. When a government doesn't know how to fix a problem, it stands up and throws money at it. And over there, they've had considerable success in setting up facilities for radioactive material. Now, this approach has now been used locally. They've started with 27 sites, they've identified 3, and they've put a proposal to the local communities and asked for submissions and what they would like in terms of facilities. The locals enthusiastically have engaged this and come up with a list. And here's one of them: Kimber, South Australia, new amenity blocks, 174,000, palliative care and hospital, 230,000, Soldiers Memorial upgrade, 208. It goes on for pages and pages. I haven't printed out all the pages, so the locals got on board with that quite enthusiastically. It went to a ballot, and the result was 57.4 were in favour of proceeding with the site. Now that's a dramatic difference of the results from the last 40 years. The reason I'm giving you this, thank you.
Move to extend. Councillor Miles and Councillor Sanderson.
The reason I'm giving you this story is that I really hate Hunters Hill. They have a cell go in with radioactive material in it, and then shortly thereafter they come good with a national facility. It's already been confirmed that material from Nelson Parade will go to a national facility. So to sum up, Property New South Wales is proposing to construct a large cell containing radioactive material in a residential street located 30 metres from an iconic waterway in the largest city in the country. In overseas countries I've examined, this proposal wouldn't even make it to a committee. You just don't store radioactive material in residential streets. It's a process that goes back to the 1960s. The cell proceeds, Hunters Hill community is going to inherit a permanent cell containing this material, and our community will inherit the only cell containing radioactive material in a residential street in Australia. This is unique. We're going to leave a problem for our future generations. And while the debate may be political, this is really an environmental issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McGlynn. Councillors, any questions of Mr. McGlynn?
Yes.
Councillor McLaughlin.
I've asked this question before. I'm not sure if you can answer it, but the proposal that Property New South Wales is putting forward for the encapsulation on site, have they given you any indication of the timeline? I think we have it. I have asked this before.
Yes, they have. They're trying to move it along prior to the next state election and get it sort of
But
past
I mean,
the point
to the very end
yes,
of
the actual
process.
Installation, I think, is 18 to 24 months.
So 2 years from.
Yes. Yeah, they've got to do design, they've got to do environmental studies. The cell is going to be quite a complex design compared to in flat land. It's a sloping block that gets wet. Most ones, when you look in the European models, they're looking for geologically stable, ideally flat, as far away from water as they can get. Of course, if these things leak, they refer to it as leachate, can get out. Interestingly, away from residential. This model would never get up in Europe. Doesn't actually even with our own requirements, doesn't quite comply. If you look at the radioactivewaste.gov.au, it reads radioactive waste is currently stored in more than 100 locations around the country, and international best practice is that it be consolidated into a single safe national facility. So this proposal is not even meeting local requirements.
Thank you. Councillors, any further questions? Thank you, Mr. McGlynn.
Thank you.
So if I could go back to the late item, moved Councillor Miles, seconded Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Miles, would you like to speak to this?
Only to say, it's something that I don't think anyone takes any pleasure in doing. It has a real financial impact on particularly those 3 lots. And I will move to debate on the encapsulation v non-encapsulation in the next item, but I'm not going to debate it here. This is purely about putting that clause in on the certificates.
Okay, anybody wishing to speak against? Councillor Williams?
I'd like to move an amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I'd like to add an item 3.
Add an additional item?
Yeah.
Item 4?
No, 3. Oh, yeah, 4. Yeah, sorry about that.
Please.
And the essence of it is that council engage with these residents to ensure that they are informed of what is being decided and how that has effect on their properties. I don't think there's been any chance for the residents to be consulted on this, and I think it's important that we consult with the residents that are affected so that they have a chance. I'm not saying that we don't proceed with it because we have to, but I think there is a need for consultation with the residents to pay them the respect that they can understand what this decision is about.
Thank you very much. It's a good suggestion. Councillor Miles?
Yes, I'm happy with that.
Right. Councillor Miles.
With your indulgence, Mr. Mayor, I might actually add a point 5, which I almost forgot, that council, in the event that remediation occurs, conduct a review with the view to, upon contamination being, the government being satisfied or council being satisfied the contamination had been appropriately removed, that the council's policy would be to remove that clause.
After just one moment, we'll see if we can pick up the words. So that the council conducts.
That subject to the remediation of contaminants, that the notation be removed from the certificates, or that council adopt a policy of removing the notation from the certificates upon completion of remediation.
I'll need to refer it to the General Manager. I think we might have some advice on that already. So,
through you, Mr. Mayor, can I suggest if we could perhaps change that to that council, in the event that remediation occurs, review the notation on the certificate.
Yep.
is that does that capture what you're trying to say?
Yep.
Right, we'll just get that up, please. No. Councillor Miles, can I, Councillor Williams, sorry.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr.
Could we have that the, in your number 4, we could go back, that the council engage with the residents of Nelson Parade?
Yes.
Or the affected residents. The affected residents.
Well, I think it's everybody in Nelson Parade. I think it should be everybody in Nelson Parade.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think it
Hold on, just a minute. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I agree, it should be everybody in Nelson Parade because everybody's in the same boat, but some are affected differently. To clarify it for the whole community.
Right. Okay. Councillor Miles, your change, is that? You happy with that?
Yes.
All right. So, Councillor Williams.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor, in relation to item 5 in the motions that now stands. I'm just a bit. I'd like to ask the question. If it is encapsulated, from my understanding, those sites where the encapsulation takes place would retain their certificates. Is that my interpretation of it?
That's my understanding, is that correct?
Yeah, the notation.
Yeah.
Yep. So, to me, that's a little bit vague as to what's intended. The council, in the event that remediation occurs, review the notation on 149 certificates.
On sites.
Won't be a carte blanche. It'll be
Can we put some
based
sites
on
against that? Is it site 5, 13 and 15?
Yeah.
I would apply it to all sites because irregardless of whether or not it's a government site or a non-government site, that citation will have to be removed if it is remediated.
Yes. That's my understanding too.
That
Councillor
was the
Williams?
intent.
Councillor Williams?
I'll accept that. That's right.
All right. So, are there any more? Do we have any more discussion on anybody wishing to speak against? Anybody for? No further discussion. I'll put the motion as it now stands with items 4 and 5 added. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. So now we move to 2.1. Now, this is just a note.
Mr. Mayor, just a procedural thing. I think
We're going
we need
backwards?
to put a seconder on that motion that we just agreed to, because otherwise we'll get to the end of the meeting and not have it.
Well, I think we do. I think Councillor Miles and Councillor McLaughlin.
No, but I meant the amendment and the agreement to that.
Do you agree with that?
I
Councillor
agree- I
Miles
agree
agrees
to the
with it.
amendment,
Councillor
so
McLaughlin,
it
do you agree also?
Yes, I agree.
It's done.
Yes, but if you go down further, if we're going to get it right, you've got there, the amendment was moved by Councillor Williams and seconded by...
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We missed the note.
Otherwise, you'll go home tonight, come back tomorrow morning and say, well, who was the second?
Thank you very much. You're my eyes from down there.
It's a long way
I
away.
struggle to see it.
I can't see.
All right.
We need a seconder.
I'll be the seconder if that assists.
Thank you.
I see. Good. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. So we go back to the mayoral minute, or to the mayoral minute. Now, I'd like to make a change to the recommendation in the mayoral minute. And it should just be item 1, so if you can take out the further items there. So in item 1, just take us to item 1.
Yeah, item 1. Yeah.
Confirms his current position of ensuring complete removal of contaminated materials from the subject sites. And then remove from until forward.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Lee? Okay, now there were some other things which we'd considered putting in there which we were leaving out. So could you delete everything after that?
So you don't want any of this?
Items 2 and 3, I think. Items 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. So could I have a mover, Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Sanson? Thank you. Any discussion needed? Councillor Williams, would you like to speak to it?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I know this is not going to please all the residents in the street, but I think we've heard tonight that this issue is resolvable, and it is a wrong thing to do to leave this material on site for future generations. There is a current proposal that could be signed off tomorrow by the Minister that would allow this material to move off site. There's agreement to move the material eventually to a federal facility, and that may take 5 to 10 years. And temporary storage is very feasible, very possible, and doesn't take much to achieve. And as we've heard tonight, there are over 100 sites where this material could be legitimately stored as radioactive material, awaiting its final destiny. I'm not proposing that the material should stay on site. I'm proposing that the material should be taken away so the whole issue is resolved once and for all. As we've heard also, this practice of encapsulation in a residential area in a sensitive and important location in Sydney would be totally unacceptable anywhere else in the world, and I don't know why we would, as a community, accept it for our community. So it fails on all principles for encapsulation. My experience is that a temporary storage facility could be easily established. It's one thing to say there are no other facilities except for Kemps Creek. We know that it can go to Queensland. We know that the EPA can establish a licensed facility very quickly and very easily if it wished to. There's no legal or technical restrictions on that. So it comes down to will, and I think Council has an obligation to assist the community in getting finality to this issue. It's totally unacceptable from an environmental and from a community wellbeing point of view to leave this material when there are other alternatives, and in the long term it should go to a federal facility. So we shouldn't be closing off those avenues, and I think the residents of the community and the whole of Sydney will be better off if this material is out of that residential area.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Anybody wishing to speak against? Councillor Grassoy.
Not so much against, I wouldn't mind suggesting an amendment if I can. Tell me when the appropriate moment is too.
All right. What's your amendment, Councillor?
I think that we just need to add, if we're striking out the line about until further detailed information is provided, I think that we do need to add, as requested by some of the residents, that council continues to engage with Property New South Wales.
Okay, so your addition is that council continues to engage with Property New South Wales.
I can make it wordier, but I think that says what our intention is.
Councillor Williams.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to incorporate that within my motion.
Thank you. Anybody wishing to speak against? Anybody for? Councillor Miles.
Mr. Mayor, I don't think I'm going to be repeating things that have been said before in this chamber, but I think that there's nothing in that motion that any of us disagree with. I will say, though, that if the option arises to move it to a temporary facility, I think we should look at it. If the option arises that it should be encapsulated with the view to take it off site, I think we should look at it. I think that whatever options are in front of us, that the removal of this material as quickly as possible, away from residents, away from the open air that it's in now. I think what we need to give consideration to is the immediate safety of the residents that are affected, one, and two, what is the quickest way to get this off-site. I think all of us want to see it at the federal facility. I think that the material is destined for a federal facility. If it means that we need to encapsulate it in the meantime to deal with political issues, then that's fine. If it means that we can find a temporary site, then all the better. I think we just need to be conscious that there are some residents that immediately adjoining for which this poses a serious health risk, and the quickest solution to mitigate that health risk needs to be assessed, whatever that solution is, and there's obviously contention in that, but the quickest solution to remove the health issue with the view, and I don't think anyone will disagree, that we want it to go to the federal facility. I think that Property New South Wales wants it to go to the federal facility. That's what we should be looking at. So I think that if Property New South Wales wants to put a proposal to us for encapsulation, we should explore that, not agree to it, but explore it. If we can find an alternative facility that's stored off-site, that we should look at it. And until all those facts are laid out in front of us, we shouldn't be making claims as a council to do one thing or another. I think we just need to let cooler heads prevail, have all the facts in front of us, and make an informed decision once we have all the information in front of us.
You're speaking for the motion?
Yes.
Thank you. Anybody wishing to speak against the motion? This has been a matter that's dogged us for a very long time. I think we would like to see the matter resolved quickly if we could. I think it's clear that we don't have enough information to consider any other proposal. We have no drawings, we have no specifications, we have no information. And until that comes along, this is our present view of this Hunters Hill Council. And it maintains a view held by the previous Hunters Hill Council for a number of years. So I'm pleased you're passing this. I think you're about to pass it. And if you are, that's our current position, puts a line in the sand, and we can reconsider at a time in the future if something of value comes along. So I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Against? That's unanimous. That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, residents, for coming and speaking to us tonight. All right. Councillors, the next item on the agenda is 4.1, Preliminary Draft Sydney Airport Master Plan 2039. We have a speaker on this matter, Mr. Tony Saunders. Mr. Saunders, excuse me.
Thank you. Unfortunately, all my supporters have left.
Mr. Saunders, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Mayor and councillors, I have been looking at this aircraft noise situation for quite a long time, and have had numerous contacts with Air Traffic Control, which is Air Services Australia, and also CASA, which is the Civil Aviation Safety Authority. I'm going to talk about the adverse health and well-being effects of aircraft noise on residents. Some people may think that aircraft noise is annoying, but it is worse than that. It is a health hazard. We may not be able to reduce aircraft over our heads at this time, but please let there not be any increase in the number of flights, and definitely no adverse change to the curfew, which I was kind of getting the feeling the other day when they were talking in there. By coincidence, I don't know if you saw last Saturday's Sydney Morning Herald, it mentions aircraft noise. In a World Health Organisation study, it says residents who live under a flight path are at greater risk of health problems, and yet Sydney Airports Corporation wants to increase flights over our heads, exacerbating this problem. They say it's because the community requires more air travel, but really isn't it more about profits? More aircraft equals more revenue equals more profits. The health effects. Major studies overseas have highlighted this problem. The UK and US studies are particularly enlightening. One US survey I saw covered a few million subjects in its survey, so it was not a minor study. We can all Google aircraft noise health effects. You can all look it up, and up will come the results on various studies concerning living under flight paths. Cardiovascular, stroke, high blood pressure, coronary heart disease, psychological health, hypertension are all listed. So I again state it's not just annoying, it's a health hazard. The federal government took on the tobacco industry, faced them down in the World Court, in World Court type proceedings for the health of its citizens. Is it going to do the same to protect its citizens against this insidious danger to our health by allowing more flights over our head, which equals more noise? A while back I was in contact with Joe Hockey when he was our local member, and he was very vocal about this noise situation and took up cudgels on our behalf. And I hope that our present MP, Trent Zimmerman, will do the same. These flights pass over our local hospital. It's not exactly conducive to recovery, I would think. They also pass over our high school and public school. I don't know about the high school, but I've been informed that there is no soundproofing in the public school. So what does this do to children's learning under a flight path? What about when they are out in the grounds during school, other than during their learning times? Studies show that children exposed to aircraft noise have poorer performance than those that are not exposed. A study, just for 2 seconds.
Move to extend Councillor Williams and Councillor Miles.
A study of 3 airports covering 89 schools in Europe, including Heathrow, found adverse effects on reading, comprehension and memory. This was after taking into account social factors and road traffic noise. Now, you notice I have not mentioned particulates which drop on our heads when planes coming low, when landing to the south. It can't be all that healthy, can it? So my message to the community and the council is, please no extra noise over our head and no relaxation of the curfew. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Saunders. Councillors, any questions of Mr Saunders? Councillor Sanson.
If more of a clarification than a question, but in regard to schools, I spent my high school years at Huntersville High School. I can assure you there's no soundproofing. In those buildings adjacent to the avenue, our classes stopped when planes flew over. So I don't know that, the altitudes might be a bit higher, but I think that brings into one of the things about steeper descent on landing, which is one of the issues I'd like to speak about later.
Thank you. Councillors, any further questions? Mr Saunders, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, councillors, we have a recommendation on page 12. Move Councillor Williams.
With some amendments.
Move Councillor Williams, perhaps with some amendments. So, your amendments, Councillor?
Or additions. I'd like to include a point 4. The council require the government to consider other modes of operation, including that glide process that was referred to. I don't know the technical term. Sorry. At our meeting with the airports people, there was reference to a glide path rather than an
higher altitude.
Yeah. So
okay, can we just go back to the motion, Councillor Williams?
Yeah,
sorry.
okay.
Councillor Williams, can we just go through it?
The council
we need to type it
require
up.
the government to consider other modes of operation, including the glide path mode. 5, the council require the government to detail opportunity to increase capacity.
So it's a no. Excuse me. Sorry, you just speak too quick for us.
Sorry.
So it's a new point.
Yep.
Point 5.
I'll correct you once again.
Which will be 5.
Yeah.
It's just been approved in the submission.
Thank you, Sir Nicky.
Yeah, in the submission.
Oh, okay, so then-
Go ahead.
Yeah, where did we get up to?
The council require the government to detail
Opportunities to increase capacity of modes, being those 15 modes they talked about, in addition to those directly over Hunters Hill. I should put in there noise sharing modes, it's probably a better term.
to a further point.
And point 6, the council require government to provide details of the assessment of the impact of air pollution on Hunters Hill. Seems to be lost in the whole process.
Could you help us here? Provide details
With
of
musts.
the air pollution.
Council require the government to provide a detailed assessment. So provide a detailed assessment. Of the impact of aircraft air pollution, being the chemical side.
So a seconder for that. Councillor Sanderson.
Could I add one more? I think
would
we may need to redraft a little bit so that these items.
Could you refer to Councillor Williams to see if he'll incorporate that in his?
I don't know what it is yet.
Well, the point I would like to make, though, I think is the one we both made at the various meetings, and that is that it relates more to the report, which we stated ours, but the report should give some commitment to the maximum use of technology to minimise aircraft noise.
Okay, following point 7, that the government consider technology, consider available technology to reduce noise.
Yeah, maximise the use of technology, or commit to using.
Okay, can you help us here?
Yeah, all right.
But there should be that the government commit.
The report commits
The report.
to the adoption of appropriate technology.
That-
The way to do that, to minimise aircraft noise.
The report commit to the
You can see it much better than I can.
adoption
You need a monitor.
of technology.
Go ahead, one.
To minimise aircraft noise.
Right. Good. Councillor Williams, are you happy with that?
I am indeed, yes.
All right. So we've got a move Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's sad to say, but like with the issue we just dealt with, this has been a long and protracted issue for Hunters Hill. It's one that, again, is something that's foisted upon our community with very little regard to the well-being and health of our community. Here we have a new plan that will, for the first time, incorporate a portion of Hunters Hill within the ANEF 20 contours. That I am unclear as to what the consequences are in terms of council's obligations to residents with 149 or 10.7 certificates, and part of the motion is to seek some advice, legal advice, as to what council's obligations are to its residents and to the households that will now find themselves officially designated as being in the ANEF 20 zone. It's unfortunate that the proposal or the report by the government doesn't give guidance as to what expectations are in terms of planning outcomes associated with these changes. It's regrettable that council has to find out for itself. It should be readily made available. We had, when the third runway was forced upon our community, an overwhelming outpouring and outrage by the Hunters Hill community. And I notice Councillor Astridge has joined, former Councillor Astridge has joined us to listen to this debate, and he played a big role many years ago in that battle against the third runway, as did many other residents in Hunters Hill. So we've got a situation where, yet again, profit is being pursued over community well-being. And as we heard tonight in the briefing from the council staff member, that in the media, in the newspaper on the weekend, it highlighted the standard is now 45 decibels, or whatever the thing is, as being the threshold of impact of people living comfortably within their homes. And the report talks about a level of 70 decibels as being the trigger point. So the report is based on unfounded and outdated evidence and technologies. We would expect better in our community of our federal government and its agencies to make sure that they do get accurate representation of the impact of these changes that will occur. It also highlights the inadequacy of the documentation to represent the future impact of, as Councillor Sanderson said, technology, and equally importantly, the development of the second airport. It doesn't go into how that relationship and impact and process will take place. It just arbitrarily forces all the international flights into Sydney, which I again suspect is a profit outcome for Sydney Airport Corporation, and leaving the rest to the Western Sydney Airport. I think that needs to be looked at more carefully as to the equity and fairness in getting a distribution of aircraft movements between the two new airports, or between the two airports, including the new one. It's interesting to note that by this inclusion in the ANF contours, that we now have 4 schools that will be caught up in this process. And we'll have Huntersville High School, Huntersville Primary School, the Riverside Girls School, and part, if not most, of St Joseph's College will now be under that restriction. And we don't know what the planning consequences are at this point in time, but we'll find out. But it could be that soundproofing is required, or future developments that might take place at these sites, including residential sites, may be required a particular building standard to accommodate and make it safe for residents. So I feel that the report and the letter that is proposed to be sent by yourself, Mr Mayor, put a forceful case that reflects very clearly what I believe the community's response is to this proposed master plan, with the addition of those additional points that I've raised. And I thank you for, I thank the staff for pulling this report together. It's very well considered, and we'll hopefully get the government to provide the adequate information to allow us to make a determination as to how it's going to impact on our community.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody wishing to speak against? Councillor Crasso.
I'd just like to speak against some of the changes. I'm always cautious in the motions that we put. Sorry, can I? Yeah. I'm always cautious in the motions that we put, that we don't get bogged down in being wordy and repetitive. Councillor Williams, I think, makes a very good point about that we haven't actually mentioned air pollution in here, and I think that is important. However, I think a few other points are actually addressed very well in this draft submission from the Mayor. You talk about long-term viability of noise sharing arrangements and the impacts on residents having not been addressed in the report. So I think that speaks to that we require the government to detail opportunities to increase the capacity of noise sharing modes. So I think you already speak about that in the submission, so I don't understand why we need to make it part of the motion, because the motion already accepts the submission. You also talk about that you're perturbed by the understanding that the government hasn't required Sydney Airport to have a financial program to collect funds for aircraft noise mitigation studies and strategies. So you do say that in the submission as well. So I don't think it's necessary to overword the motion. You talk about a system being needed to fund these independent thorough studies, but most strongly you point out that it's disingenuous to ask us to comment on this plan at all, really. The oversight of the airport is obviously lacking, and that they should appoint an independent regulator separate to Air Services Australia. So you strongly recommend that they actually withdraw this PDMP 2039 altogether from public exhibition and refuse to commence assessment on any part of it until these issues have been raised. So I just recommend that we pull out points that we require the government to consider other modes of operation, because I think that is actually covered in your submission, that we require them to detail opportunities to increase capacity of noise sharing, because you've already said that several times in your submission quite eloquently, and that the report commit to the adoption of alternate technology to minimise aircraft noise, again, repetitive, and you've already said it in the submission. So the only point that I would agree to leaving in the original recommendations or adding to the original recommendations is number 6.
Okay, so are you proposing an amendment, or are you foreshadowing a change if the motion doesn't pass?
If that motion doesn't pass, I would foreshadow going back to the original recommendation, just with the addition of point 4, which is what is currently 6.
Thank you, Councillor.
Just to keep it concise.
Anybody wishing to speak for the motion? Councillor Sanderson.
A lot of points to be made. I think Mr. Saunders for his contribution. I think the technology side of it is incredibly important, because one of the things that I've observed in my life living under the northern flight path is that the conditions have changed somewhat, and one of the things that have improved immensely at times is the steeper takeoffs and steeper landings. There is technology available to improve that. I think that that's not being employed to their fullest extent. I think what's got to happen, I think technology will play a big role in the future of aircraft operations. So I think it's important that that point remain in the motion. I don't know that the technology has been covered. I didn't see it myself at the time I read through, but Councillor Cresso might be a more thorough reader than I. But I don't know whether it's covered that specific point.
It has.
But no, I would speak for the motion. Aircraft noise has been a scourge in this municipality for a long time, and I don't know that we can promise to stop it increasing at all, but there needs to be proper constraints on it. The other issue I'd make is that I think in a lot of ways the master plan, it has to be rejected, not just for the reasons in the report, but also that I think it's coming from the wrong place. It's coming from a commercial operation who's motivated by profits for their particular airport. What we really need is a master plan for the combined airports in the whole of Sydney. That could be addressing issues like transport and transport more broadly, so that we can ensure that when Badgerys Creek does come online, that it takes a significant share. And there's a lot of thought can go into that process. The master plan doesn't go there. We need some document that does so.
Thank you, Councillor Sanders. Anybody else wishing to speak against? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Right, if you need right of reply, yes, certainly.
I think I do. I don't see the issue that Councillor Crasso is pressing. I'm not diminishing what your report says, and as I said, I think the report is very good, and the letter that's created from that. But I think it's important for Council to include in its recommendation those key elements which I've put forward. It's not demeaning or diminishing or changing what, it's just adding to and making sure that those points are clearly raised and appear in the Council's decision. People may not read the draft letter, they may just read what Council's decision is. And I think it's important that and incumbent on Council, that we include the information that's relevant and important. It's not wordy, it just highlights issues that I believe need to be recorded in the minutes that help and don't detract at all from the letter that we're proposing to send. So I commend to Council the recommendation as it stands, and I think it's important that we communicate with our community the key elements which we're concerned about, and I think this motion does that.
Thank you, Councillor Williams, and thank you very much for your compliment on the letter that the staff wrote on my behalf, so thank you very much to the staff. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. The next item, and thank you for your patience, is item 4.2, Mark Street, Huntersville, St Joseph's College. And we have a speaker, is Mr Richard Quinn, Emeritus Mayor Quinn. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, councillors, the lot falls on me to be here tonight rather than the headmaster, Dr Christopher Hayes, who extends his apologies. He certainly wanted to be here tonight, but given the short notice and another commitment that's actually on right now, which I have to go back to, he was unable to be here this evening. This proposal that is currently with Planning New South Wales, as you're aware, is about a physical education and sports facility at St Joseph's College. Physical education and sport play a central role in the cognitive, social, emotional, physical and spiritual development of students. The complex that is proposed is to be built on 4 existing outdoor basketball courts. The project will deliver a number of key benefits to students, staff and the broader community, including indoor relocation of the majority of games that take place both on weekends and during the week, and this will significantly reduce the noise and disruption, the impact of noise on neighbours in Luke Street, for example. The improved facilities will also, we certainly plan to continue to share those with local community groups and clubs who are current users of those courts. The facility will also provide increased parking on site, which will ease congestion on the surrounding streets. It's going to provide specialist teaching and learning spaces for physical development, health and physical education classes, which is now a compulsory subject in New South Wales for years 7 to 10 and an elective in years 11 and 12. The indoor facilities will also replace those current outdoor facilities. And it's also a place, given that St Joseph's College is predominantly a boarding school, it's the playground, if you like. It's the recreational facility for 560 boarders who physically live at the school in all weather conditions. Now, the complex also includes 85 additional car parking spaces, and this gives a net increase of 55 spaces on site. And therefore, it should improve the traffic conditions by reducing the demand for parking on the adjacent streets around the college. Now, all of those things that I've just mentioned, none of those are given any attention or credence in the draft proposal that's coming from Council to Planning New South Wales. For example, bullet point number 7 on the draft letter suggests that there are going to be worse traffic incomes. I'm a little perplexed to understand how that logic can be included. From the outset, St Joseph's College has strived to ensure that we take into account the feedback of everyone who lives, works or learns in our college community and the surrounding area. And as you're aware, through the consultation phase, we've gone very broadly around our local community. And the headmaster has asked me to ensure that councillors understand that the college is committed to maintaining this dialogue and commitment to local dialogue with the community throughout the assessment period. The college notes that there have been no submissions from residents in Luke Street to council about this proposal. Councillors, this facility is focused on what's going to happen inside the building. It's focused on developing positive minds, healthy bodies, and therefore happy boys. That's our focus. It's focused on being a counterbalance to the sedentary and virtual demands of social media, online gaming, and other things in our technology-driven age. That, as research shows and has proven, are having adverse impacts on young minds today. It's about the harmonious and complete development of the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. And we ask you that in your submission to Planning New South Wales, please consider these other very positive impacts that are intended to be the result of this facility that's put forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Quinn, do you think we could have a copy of your presentation this evening?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much. Maybe
I'll
there's
put
some
a few
points in there we
handwritten notes on
can pick up. Thanks for your submission. I acknowledge the contribution that St Joseph's makes to the area that we live in, to 560 boarders that I don't see walking the streets of the night or causing trouble in my street, which is 2 streets away. So I appreciate what you do and the way you look after those young people.
Thank you.
You said you share this facility with other schools?
Yes, we do. Well, our sports facilities, for example, are used regularly by Villa Maria School, Hunters Hill High School. We have the Wheelchair Sports New South Wales use our indoor basketball court. A number of those athletes go on to the Paralympians. So the college is open to community use of its facilities, and I know that's very much the intent of the New South Wales Government with school infrastructure projects as well. St Joseph's College remains committed to that community sharing, if you like, of our resources.
Okay. Thank you. Councillors, any questions of Mr. Quinn? Councillor McLaughlin.
Emeritus Mayor Quinn. What changes have you made to the development in response to the community feedback that you had?
Well, look, I'm going to, if I may, that particular detail, we've got our planner here with us today, so she'll be speaking in just a moment. She's better positioned to give you those exact, precise answers. We've also got the architect here with us tonight as well.
Great.
To be able to respond to that, so if I could ask you to, I'll take that on notice and flick it to them. Thank you.
Councillor Collins.
Yes. The building's going to extend 100 metres along Luke Street.
Yep.
I understand.
That's right.
And you haven't had any submissions from anyone in Luke Street?
Well, Hunters Hill Council hasn't received any submissions from anyone at Luke Street.
Well, are we the ones accepting the submissions? Or?
No, Planning New South Wales is, but my understanding is what we're dealing with tonight is Council's submission to Planning New South Wales, and included in consideration in Council's submission is submissions that have come to Council from the community. I'm simply pointing out that as I see it in the business paper tonight, there have been no submissions from anyone in Luke Street.
But surely there'd be people in Luke Street that have submitted to planning or not?
We don't know that. The public exhibition period closes in the next day.
Okay.
So I can't answer that. I'm simply commenting on the council position and the council's submissions provided to the council. That's what we're dealing with tonight.
Councillor Williams.
Emeritus Mayor Quinn. In the proposal, you describe this building as being a 2-storey building, but in the detail it shows it to be a minimum of 16 metres, if not 17.7 metres, which, if you equate that to a traditional building, would be at least 5 stories. So I'm just a bit concerned that the community is getting the right impression of what this development is about, because 2 stories is a totally different concept in people's minds to a 5-storey building. And if you look at the education block, the classroom block, that's 4.5 stories. So you're talking about a building another half a story, if not more, above that in terms of scale. So I'm just wondering how you've been conveying the scale and scope of this development to the community if you're talking about a 2-storey building, and in fact that's equivalent to at least a 4, if not 5-storey building.
No, well, in the definition of story is the activity and so on that happens at that level. This building is nowhere near the ground floor to roof height of the classroom block you're referring to, for example. It won't be anywhere near that. So if you're referring to the classroom block that, over near Mary Street, for example, we're not going to be anywhere near.
That's 4 stories.
We're not going to be anywhere near that height. Anyway, again, the architect or the planner can respond to that in detail. The driver of the dimensions of this building is a basketball court. So a basketball court has set length, width, and height. So in what's proposed, we've tried to minimise the bulk of the building, but you can't shrink a basketball court smaller than its dimensions. You can't have half a basketball court or a basketball court that's got a low ceiling. There's standards around all sports courts, both length, width, and height. So the driver of the height of this building is the height of a basketball court, for example, and the dimensions of the basketball court, plus the curtilage around the sidelines and goal lines, if you like, of a court. We currently have a court at the school that was constructed in 1980, 1981. It doesn't comply anymore in terms of its setbacks from sideline to walls, for example. So we're trying to address all of those issues as well. There's a minimum height from the floor level of a basketball court to the first obstruction above it. We have that roof height set at that level, not higher than. So they're the drivers. And that's also the driver that's impacting, if you like, on the setback along Luke Street, because a basketball court is as big as a basketball court is, and you can't shrink it. You can't have a 3/4 basketball court, championship basketball court. It just, we couldn't use it.
Councillor Collins.
Yeah, I understand that you've had some community sort of events to explain what you're doing. What sort of engagement have you had, and how has that feedback? Has any of that been? Maybe that's a question for Sandra, but how has it sort of shaped how this has ended up? Has anyone from Luke Street come in and made any suggestions that's? Can you maybe?
Yes, so we did have a number of residents from Luke Street, in the Muse, for example, that townhouse development in Luke Street. We had residents come from Matthew Street. We've had residents come from the Heritage across the road. So we have had people come in. They did come to our consultation sessions. We ran 2 consultation sessions at the school. We ran one down in outside Ward Real Estate here in Huntersville Village. We also letterboxed a huge area around the school, inviting them to come to those consultation sessions or to view the plans. So I think the college has done all of that in goodwill. We've done as much as we can in terms of getting the word out there about what we're proposing, and I'd be surprised if anyone around the place here didn't know what was going on, because we've had worked hard on that community consultation.
What I was so they're all aware of it, but what sort of engagement, what sort of feedback have you had from them? Particularly, my biggest concern is the residents of Luke Street that are going to be faced with this.
Understood.
And I can't imagine them coming to these events and being very positive about it. How has their feedback been taken on board, and what changes have? And again, maybe that's been a question for Sandra. Has that?
And probably also to Robert, who's here, the architect. We've sought to shrink it down as low as we possibly could to minimise the height of it for a start. So we pushed it down as much as we could. It's basically a car park with a basketball court on top of it. So from the slab level of the car park, then you've got the slab level of the basketball court to the roof. We've shrunk those down as much as we possibly could to minimise the height, but dimensions of a court are what they are. We can't reduce them any further in that regard. We've pushed as much as we can into the the engineering, for example, of the roof structure. We've attempted to minimise that as much as possible, so that it's not bigger than it needs to be. So all of those sort of details have been addressed by our architects in response to the issues. We understand what the issues are. It's basically the bulk and scale appearance, particularly on the southeast facade of the building. But the site is constrained because of the amount of land that is there to be developed versus fitting a basketball court on it. And our options for putting that elsewhere on the college campus, we've looked at every other possible option. Anywhere else we start to have an adverse impact on the main heritage items, for example, of the school. The comment made in this is the impact on the heritage fence, the wall, the stone wall around the place. But we've got the whole iconic, front facade of the main college building. That's where a lot of our open space is. If we start fiddling with that, we're just not going to do that, because this is the optimum site for it, given all of the other uses and whatnot that we have on the college campus.
Councillor Sanderson, did you have a question?
Yes, interesting that you used the term curtilage around a basketball court. I wondered, in terms of being able to have more articulation of the building, whether it was possible to reduce the curtilage in terms of having a bit less seating around the auditorium part of that building.
Okay, well, Councillor, I think if you look at the plans, you'll see that the curtilage is the goal line of a basketball court, curtilage behind a wall, setback from the wall in Luke Street, and there you have it. So we actually don't have seating in that area. That there is a court that goes north-south.
That's right.
And it is set back quite away from the street. The one that I'm understanding the council has its objection to is particularly the court that will be located on the corner of Luke Street and Gladesville Road. And there is no seating that we can minimise there. It's the curtilage around the court, and that's it.
But if you reduce as I recall, the seating is on in the upper level, is it, or is it?
No, the seating, the upper level seating is in a court that's further to the north and set in westward on the college site.
Okay.
Yeah. The one where the impact from what we're reading of the council's objection, there is no tiered seating looking onto that court. It's a goal line, setback as required, wall, then the setback to the fence of Luke Street. There's no seating there. That's correct. Yeah. But perhaps if you have a look at the floor plan,
I'll have another look.
Councillor Prasley.
Mr Mayor, are we going to have the opportunity to ask the architects?
Yes, we will.
I'll save my questions. Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
One final question. Is this the final step in the college's development? Is there a master plan that has a more broader vision as to the college's development over the next few years? Because
Yes,
there are comments that this is just part of the process.
Sure. Well, look, what I can tell you, for example, and you'd be aware of this as a parent of the school, the college currently has a swimming pool which was constructed in 1955. It is 55 yards long, not 50 metres long. It is 7 lanes. There are 8 Sydney GPS schools. We can't use our swimming pool for water polo, for example. We can't use it for competitive swimming because it's an imperial length swimming pool. So something has to be done with a swimming pool. So that is another phase of the master plan, addressing the aquatic side of it. We also can't use that pool, like you'd be aware many schools have heated indoor pools so that they can be used throughout the year. We can't use ours, it's not heated, it's not deep enough for water polo, which is now a sport played at all GPS schools. We have to do all that stuff off-site. Our swimming teams don't compete in our own swimming pool, they go to Ryde or Lane Cove or Hundle. So that's...
Is there a time frame for the development?
When we get the money to do it. It's quite a few years away, I suggest. Yep.
Councillors, any further questions of Mr. Quinn? Thank you, Mr. Quinn.
Okay.
I ask Ms. Robinson to come forward. We allow you 3 minutes.
Okay, I will be very
Thank you.
swift. Good evening, Mr Mayor and councillors. Thanks for the opportunity to address you. My name's Sandra Robinson. I'm the town planner that wrote and coordinated the EIS. We understand that council has concerns about the project, but as Richard suggested, we would ask that you consider some of the positive attributes of the development in your submission, because at the moment it is fairly, it's a very strong objection, and we believe that there are some attributes that council would endorse. As Richard said, the project replaces 4 outdoor courts with 3 new indoor courts. The existing courts are undersized, they're in poor condition, they're exposed to the weather, and they have no acoustic screening to protect the amenity of nearby residents. Enclosing the courts is good for the school and the community. The building, it's high quality materials. It's been designed by Tanner Kibble Denton. They're highly regarded architects that have expertise in heritage design and education projects. The existing structures on the site that would be demolished are not heritage significant, and buildings near the site on Loop Street and Bladesville Road were built quite recently and they don't have heritage significance. The historic sandstone wall that I'm sure is very, very highly regarded by the community, that will be retained and has been a really important part of the project. The proposal, well, you asked about some of the Luke Street residents. I actually met a number of them at the consultation. They were pleased to see the street tree planting in Luke Street being replaced and upgraded and in a sort of coordinated, designed way. They did express concern about height. But one of the things that, you know, they talked a lot about planting, they talked a lot about lighting, which I'm hoping the school has lighting from existing oval lights. And there was a real mixture of people. They were concerned about shadows, so we provided a lot of information in the EIS, a lot of detailed analysis on shadows. In terms of their formal submissions, that's happening right now. So what you're going through in preparing your submission for Wednesday, I think it's Wednesday it closes, no doubt that's what the local community are also doing. And after that exhibition period, that's when we become aware of the formal submissions from the local community. The people I met on site, it was a chat, you know, somebody spoke to me, somebody else spoke to Richard, somebody else might have spoken to the consultation coordinators. There is a report that documents what people said, but the really formal consultation happens now. So sorry, I'll just continue on with some of the positive attributes. It's been very carefully designed to be acoustically sealed. There's management protocols that says whenever there's an event that has amplified music, louvers get closed. Most of the time they'll be kept open for natural ventilation of the facility, you know, when it's a school basketball game. But any events at night, those louvers get closed to protect the amenity of the Luke Street residents. The school's aiming for an informal Green Star 4-star rating, which I think is something that council would applaud. In terms of the traffic concern, that's I think the last bullet point in your submission, I would really urge council to reconsider that point. There's 1,100 students, 200 staff, 600 boarders on the site now, and that will be unchanged by this proposal. There's an extra 55 car parking spaces that will take pressure off local streets. We've had a very, very detailed traffic report that has been critiqued already by the department, and the conclusion is that traffic conditions will not change from the proposal. So I would ask that you reconsider that bullet point. There's a very detailed construction management plan in the EIS to minimise impacts for local residents and also the school community. And in terms of height, I think that there's been some differences in the way height's been measured by council in the report. We've used the clinical existing ground level and height of the structure above ground level, and it's 14 metres down at Bladesville Road. And then as you work up, because of the slope of the land, it's 8.6 metres high. There are numbers of buildings already on the Joey site that have heights of 14 or more metres. The main building has a height of 21 metres. So there inevitably is a difference in the scale between an education building and the low density context, and I guess in some respects the Joey site has the advantage of being an island site and having streets to separate it, but you know we can't tell you that it's got a residential scale because it doesn't have a residential scale. So you know we completely understand council and the community's concern about that difference between an education building and the dwellings, but you know, we just ask that you consider some of the positive attributes in your submission. Thank you. And Robert Denton, the architect, is here if you have any questions about the layout of the building. Do you mind if he comes up to, is that okay?
I might...
I'll try and answer it if I need.
No, I'm happy to ask Mr Denton to even speak if you'd like to. Would you like to speak?
I'll answer some questions.
All right, please come up then. Councillor Crasoy.
I have a very basic question. I'm not an architect, though I walk up and down that street all the time. From what I understand from the plans I looked at a while ago and from what I see in this document, they haven't changed too much. A lot of the action's happening up the northern end, so there's going to be a court running that way and there's going to be platforms overlooking a little bit of possibly some classroom breakout room space up above. Down on the Gladesville Road loop corner that we are most concerned about, it's a basketball court with a lot of airspace above it. That's actually higher than the requirement for a basketball court, I thought. And I'm just wondering, even if it's not, even if it's the absolute minimum that it can be, but from the plans I originally looked at, there's this beautiful, and I love it, but just because of where it is, I don't. There's this lovely big airspace above the main court. And what I'm curious about is, isn't there a way on this corner that everyone finds, it's not that the building is ugly, it's just where it is unsightly. Is there not a way to set back just the second level so that once you're at that safe zone for a basketball court, you could just come in a bit, even if it's just in that curtilage area, that say from the top of the first floor, you can just push it back a few metres so that it's cut back in a bit and have some planter boxes or balcony seating or I don't know what, but something to just break that right on the street, that 14 metres of...
Look, there's a requirement for a 7-metre clearance for the basketball court, so it's quite a high internal space. There's a zone above that for services. There may be some possibility of working through that. In a DA, we're setting a sort of volume for the building as a maximum. If we can resolve those services within the depth of the roof, will come down a fraction even from there. But it's got to be 7 metres from the surface of the court, so it's still quite a high space.
But what I'm talking about is that curtilage area.
Yeah, well, the curtilage area for a men's basketball court is 28 metres, and we need 2 metre runoff. In simple terms, around the court for compliance. As Richard said, the school has a court, and there's a number of schools that have courts with less runoff, and they really can't use it for Saturday sport because of the insurance issues and so on. But that height has to continue for the full width from the boundary line of the court.
Yes, but not from the curtilage area.
Yeah.
So let's say at court level, it goes all the way out, but once you get to the 7 metre height, can't it come in a bit?
Oh, potentially.
Just to break this. I mean, it's just so solid. And I just walked down there the other day. Oh, and the other quick question is, will you be putting in some height, I don't know, what are they called? Height poles?
Look, so that height poles for a project of this scale would be
demonstrative.
Well, it would be a very big construction for the school to take on. We haven't actually talked about, part of the problem with them is wind and because they're literally a pole up 14 metres. Most of the projects I've worked on have had high poles been houses, so they're a more manageable size of building. But I think we need to take that on.
Yeah, look, the college is certainly happy to do that if that's what council wants, but we'd be talking like a full goalpost height pole, a very big one.
You could just use scaffolding.
Well, but then just the boys can get on each other's shoulders and we can take a photo. But just to give some sense.
I think we just need to get some advice on what would be structurally stable and not pose any.
Fairly tight with the existing courts as well.
But I think we can get some advice on that. I mean, I think that's going to stay in your submission, so we'll be asked to respond to that.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I think the issue's been raised before, but I'll raise it again. Why does the car park have to be out of the ground? You could achieve a significant reduction of the building if the car park was set underground.
I think they do dig down a bit, don't you?
One end.
A little bit of the northern end.
It had to do with
There's quite a fall on the site, and so we dig in at the northern end quite a bit. And the ground floor level of the building aligns basically with the music centre next to it, so that sets some of the levels for us.
But you're not willing to give a little bit to the community, particularly the Loop Street people, by reducing the height by setting it down? It would make a significant difference.
Oh, we can look at that. There'd be a limit because we've got to get accessibility into the building and so on. We have some lifts and things like that, but we're trying to get ramps up, and as I said, we're setting that ground floor level around about the level of that road adjacent to it. There's a bit of a change.
Everything I'm hearing is in favour of the college, not in favour of helping out community. It's all about what the college needs. It does. You don't say anything about what the Loop Street people might need. And Councillor Crassel has mentioned the issue of bringing things in. I mentioned the issue of lowering it down.
I think we said we look at it.
That all gives relief to those people who are going to be overshadowed by this.
Possibly. I haven't had instructions on this. What I would ask, and I do a lot of school projects, and I think it would be fabulous if council was to say in the submission, we don't have an objection to St Joseph's College having better basketball courts, but could you consider these things? At the moment, it's a really negative submission that just says refuse it, and it would be much more constructive, I think, for the council, for the boys of Joey's and for the local community, for it to be a submission that said, consider stepping it in, consider lowering the car park.
But we asked those questions before, and this is the design that's been put to us.
Which brings me back to my question.
Hold on a minute, councillors. Could we just have one? Councillor Williams, has that answered your question?
Yes, Mr Mayor, thank you.
Councillor Collins was next, please.
On just further to what Councillor Williams has said, what would the implications be of really just digging down a lot further and doing the same building, but I don't know, 8 metres deep, which would obviously bring the whole thing down? Is that a possibility, or is it prohibitively expensive? Or
yeah, I think that would get us out of alignment with working with the adjacent buildings if we were to go right down.
But cost is obviously certainly a consideration, but I think that it's complex stitching together the existing pedestrian vehicular connections. But again, I think what happens with these school projects is that we are going to get your submission, we are going to get the community's submissions and be told, respond to it. And I know that we had a meeting with you, but we're at the business end now. And I know that I'm being really frank with you. Now is the time that changes have to be made. They really have to be made now. The consultation was really important for us to to meet the local community, to give them information. A big part of the consultation is making the information accessible to the community. A lot of the people that came to see us were older. I don't expect that they would be comfortable. This is one volume of the EIS. There's 2 volumes, it's all electronic. We were really trying hard to communicate to the residents what the project was about. We didn't expect to persuade people that didn't like it to like it. And we didn't have enough information from them to make radical changes that might satisfy one person but upset another. But this is the formal consultation period. Big objective of that consultation at the school was to inform people.
We'll go to Councillor McLaughlin, then we'll go back to Councillor Crasso.
Which brings me back to the question which I originally had, was what changes have you made? Now, you said that you have consulted with council and you have done that, but you've also come to the Conservation Advisory Panel, and we've raised a number of issues about breaking it, putting it down underground, articulating the top level. All of those things were addressed by CAP early in the piece. But we haven't seen any of those changes being made, but now you're asking us to put them into this so that you can consider them. So my question is, what changes did you make in relation to the very strong comments that
Look, I wasn't at that meeting,
the Heritage Advisors made?
The envelope hasn't changed. I'm not going to sugarcoat it.
Right.
The envelope hasn't changed. There were some changes to materials. There was some articulation of that corner of Luke Street and Gladesville Road to make that a more interesting elevation, but the envelope hasn't changed.
Councillor Crasso?
No, I don't think I really wanted to add much more, but to say that, I mean, you know, of course, we all agree in physical fitness and health, but and boys having a great space to exercise. My kids went to Newington and have had all sorts of value out of the fabulous facilities there on a sloping site. But I don't think that that's what they're asking us to. They're not asking us to say, you know, do you want to hold Joey's hand through this? They're asking us for our opinion, and this is. We're giving it quite strongly because we really need to send that message quite strongly that this is how we feel about, not just for the people of Luke Street and Gladesville Road, but everyone in Hunters Hill who walks down that street. So I understand what you're asking us to do, but I don't want to sugarcoat this.
Sure, I respect that.
Councillor Sanderson.
Yeah, the one thing I found looking at your drawings, a lot of the time it's fairly difficult to find the precise details. One of the things that remains a complete mystery is what the actual setbacks are off Luke Street and Gladesville Road.
It's about 1.3 off Luke Street and about 3 to 4 off Gladesville Road, sort of areas on Gladesville Road.
Right.
So.
Councillor, are there any further questions?
Just on the set.
Councillor Miles.
Is there a reason that there was no planting or deep soil planting thought of on the setbacks?
On Luke Street, it's
side.
just dimensions, the pressure of getting the courts in, and you know the practicalities of maintaining a landscape strip at that dimension. On Gladesville Road, there is planting.
Planting on the council land?
No, on the site. Because there's more space.
We have one more question, I think, from Councillor Williams.
Yes, Councillor Miles has mentioned the issue of plantings and trees, but I note in the council's report here they mention there is 31 trees to be removed as a result of this development. The college recently, over the last few years, has removed numerous other significant trees in our area, and one of the key factors of Hunters Hill is its tree canopy and its greenness. The way the college is going at the moment, it will just become a built environment that won't have any aesthetics in terms or contribute to the principles and values of Hunters Hill, which is all about tree canopy and greenery and garden environment.
Well, if I could, Councillor, just clarify, there are 31 trees to be removed, 6 are high retention value, 17 moderate and 8 low. But there's a very detailed landscape plan that I can't remember the exact number of replacement trees, I'm sorry, but there is a very carefully thought through replacement tree plan.
My reading of the replacement trees was about 11 or 12. It's a big disparity between I could be wrong, but there was I noticed, that's why I asked the question, because you're taking a lot of vegetation out, and the college has recently taken a lot of vegetation out as well. At what point does the college return back to the community a more landscaped environment rather than a harsh built environment? It's just a comment.
Yeah.
It's just my observation of one of the aspects which the staff have raised in this application, 31 trees, and you've said that there's 8 that are low retention, the rest are high retention or moderate. So high and moderate would be trees of value. So most of the trees that are coming out are going to have a detrimental impact on that garden environment of Hunters Hill. So I think that's another issue the college needs to think about seriously as to how it can re-engage and contribute back to the community those important values which we have, and that's a landscaped garden environment with a tree canopy, not just shrubs. So,
look, as I say, I haven't got an exact number.
But the numbers might vary, but in terms of the spirit and proportion things, it's basically right. So it's just a point.
I think we have one more question too. Two more questions. Councillor Sanderson has had his hand up for a while. Is there a question, Councillor Sanderson?
Yes. One of the things that's sort of snuck under the radar a bit is the interim gymnasium, because there's been so much concentration on that building on the corner. And I know at CAP, our heritage architect, Brian McDonald, made the point about that building and its proximity to the chapel, which I think is of great concern. It calls it interim, so do we have any assurances about the lifespan of that particular building?
I have to defer to Richard on that one.
All I could simply say, it follows on from the other question that Councillor Williams asked earlier. When the funds are available, we would love to be able to open up that space again.
So I can assume that the building will be there for the rest of my lifetime.
Well, we hope it won't be there for that long, Councillor, given that you've got 3 more years yet to live. But,
well, it's been designed as a fairly low-scale building that doesn't compete with the chapel, and there's already some buildings in that vicinity which have that. It's a very strong building form, the rear of the chapel, so it should sit fairly quietly. Got a kind of palette of sort of timber materials and softer materials, so it should blend in reasonably well.
I think we have time for just one more question, if I might. Councillor Miles.
Time being consideration, do we have to extend?
No, this
11.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Denton and Ms. Robinson, thank you very much for your submissions. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Thank you, Mr. Quinn. So, councillors, it's item 4.2. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved, Councillor Crasso, seconded Councillor McLaughlin.
Mr. Mayor, just one correction, if I may. In point 1, it refers to the southwestern corner. It should be the southeastern corner.
Correct.
Well, it's the western corner of Luke Street. It's a southwestern corner, southeastern corner of the site.
That's where it says.
So,
again, what do you think the correction is? Give us the page, give us the item.
Well, you just did it there. It's where
you can see it there,
it should be southeastern corner.
Steve? Sorry, I have trouble seeing this one.
That's my belief anyway.
Southeastern. Southeastern.
Yep. It's southwestern, I think. Yep.
All right, thank you. So, moved Councillor Crasso and seconded just a moment. Councillor Crasso, would you like to speak?
I think we've all said a lot and heard plenty. I think this is a good recommendation. I don't think anyone in the community or at the school doubts our strong relationship with Joey's and Joey's with council. And so it's not with any personal issue that I thank the council staff for putting together this recommendation. And I think that we as a council do need to send a reasonably strong message that we would like to see this redesigned. We would love to see the boys at Joey's with an indoor sports stadium soon, and look forward to all the exciting master plan upgrades down the track. But this design needs major rework, and so I fully agree with this recommendation.
Wishing to speak against?
Proposing an amendment.
We have your amendment, please, Councillor.
Just in point 3, the Minister for Planning be requested to set up a public meeting with the assistance of Hunters Hill Council for the proposed development.
And I'm fine with that.
29.
And that's fine.
You happy with that? Okay, Councillor Cresswell, you're happy with that amendment? So anybody wishing to speak against? Anybody for? Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, I thank the council staff for the preparation of the submission, but I would like to possibly include in the start of the submission that council raises its strong objection to the state significant development. Mr. Smith has put in his recommendation that the Minister for Planning be advised that council strongly objects to the state significant development application. And I think we need to put that in our submission.
Is that
Not in the letter.
Not in the
point
letter.
one?
No, we've only said it in the recommendation. And I want to preface that by saying that I agree with Councillor Crasslow's comments about the contribution that St Joseph's College makes to Hunters Hill, and I would go as far as saying that I don't think Hunters Hill would be Hunters Hill without St Joseph's College. It plays a very important role, and because of that, it has a very important responsibility within this community to give back to the community and its neighbourhood. And while we understand the need for the extra facilities, we also have to balance that with the neighbourhood in general and the community expectations to provide buildings which are within the scope and scale of the area. And this, as was strongly suggested in CAP, is a overdevelopment, a massive building on a street which has heritage impacts. So Council's Heritage Advisor has spoken very strongly against this development. CAP has spoken very, very strongly against this development, and I think our submission needs to reflect that very, very clearly. I would have liked to have seen as a result, as I mentioned before, of CAP having given you those very, very strong objections, that something was incorporated from that into the development, but it doesn't seem to have occurred. So I don't have confidence at this point that we can give anything in this submission, because we really haven't been given anything. I would like to explore a little further your comments about the traffic. Maybe we could just look at that issue and just clarify, whether there is I'm sure you've looked at the traffic impacts, but the college is telling us that the traffic impact statement very strongly says that there will be no impact. So I just sort of maybe word that a little bit differently or have a look at that. But at this point, I can't support the proposal in its current form.
So you are speaking for?
Yes.
Anybody wishing to speak against? Anybody wishing to speak for?
Do I get to just quickly wrap up with the right of reply, even though there wasn't an objection? Oh,
You
good.
will. You will. You will.
Maybe I'll just, if I can, just
You
briefly.
wish to speak for or against?
For the yes, for.
Councillor Collins.
Yeah, I just want to say that my major concern is not necessarily design of the building, just where it is and how big it is, and I'm very concerned, particularly about the residents of Luke Street, and I would be very interested to hear what they have to say, and that's why I think the consultation has to be a two-way process where there's a feedback mechanisms where things can change and be altered. And I'm just not convinced that that's been done to the degree that I would like it. So I'd be very interested to hear what residents of Luke Street have to say in particular. And yeah, there are absolutely redeeming features of what Joey's does as an organisation, but that's not really the point of this. So it's not about how great Joey's are, and they are. It is about this massive building just leering over Luke Street. So.
All right, we're all done. Councillor Crasso, right of reply.
Thank you. Something Councillor McLaughlin just said tweaked with me because you mentioned about the parking, and I would just add that in this master plan design for this beautiful stadium that will be able to host other schools. There will also down the track be an aquatic centre and major improvements to the school. I think it's a given that 55 parking spots will be gobbled up fairly quickly. Yeah, and then just lastly, it's such a beautiful suburb. We have so many landmark heritage and modern buildings that I look forward to the opportunity to work with Joey's if this comes back, so that we can really deliver something that the whole suburb will be proud of, just as we are as proud of Joey's as we currently are. So.
Thank you. So, do you wish to make any additions to anything else that you want to add to this report? Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Crasso, which relate to the parking. Was there a suggestion?
I did actually forget one thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but is there any mention of the heritage stone wall in this report? The impact on the heritage stone wall? Yeah. Is there? Yeah. Okay.
All right, we're all done. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you very much for attending this evening. I'm sorry it didn't quite go the way you'd perhaps hoped for.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Astridge, too.
Good to see you.
The next item we're dealing with tonight is item 4.3.
I'm not in the letter.
Move Councillor Williams, second Councillor Collins. Councillor Miles is out of the room. Is there anybody wishing to speak to this? Any questions, comments? Can I put it, Councillor Williams? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Item 4.4. Development applications determined by the Development Control Unit. Moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor McLaughlin. Any comments? Councillor Crasso.
Can I just ask a question, because I'm not quite understanding this bit about the median strip. Am I understanding that if the RMS come back and say it's too hard, that we're not going to put anything there to obstruct cars from turning right? Oh, sorry. On the first item, 7 to 9 Ryde Road. how I read it is that in the event that New South Wales Roads and Maritime don't give approval, then the condition will cease to have any effect and be stamped approved.
Through you, Mayor, that's correct. It's their road, they have jurisdiction.
And then, that being the case, is there nothing that then gets changed in the design of the building of the driveway access to prevent cars from being able to turn right heading west? Because, I mean, for example...
The process will follow would be that they have to come, that's the outcome of the RMS.
Yep.
They'll have to come back to council to amend their approval to delete that, and we will consider that at that particular time.
Because that's not what it says here. What it says is then that condition will cease to have effect and stamped approved plans will be released accordingly.
But they still have to amend that condition. Delete it through section 96.
Because it's a really dangerous corner if someone does that. I think it's really important that we address that driveway.
I think the RMS might, through you, Mayor, the RMS might come up with a different solution. It's basically the strip, it's not wide, it's too wide, and it doesn't allow, so they might come up with a different solution.
Councillor Williams.
On page 68.10, could I get a bit more of an explanation as to what that means? I'm just a bit confused as to how it works and what's being required there, because it talks about an adjacent property, is that right?
Yeah, it was, the history there, we had 7 and 9, and we had the last lot that was landlocked, and the argument was that if we can put an easement or right of way that in future development, when the site is released to be developed, the person leaves that wants to develop that site, there's opportunities. We have the opportunity to allow the access for underneath that property. So council is the authority with regard to allowing that to happen. So we tie up the developer to ensure we get access to the other property, so it's not landlocked. Hard to explain, easy to draw and show you later on if you want me to.
It makes sense.
Third question, why is council involved in that? It seems to be a private matter that we're putting obligations on a developer to achieve private outcomes.
It happens a lot in all planning matters. As council gets involved as a third party with development to ensure, as a responsible council, to ensure that development happens in an appropriate way and ensuring that landlocked properties are released to be developed in the future. I think this application did come to council from me as well. And it was a decision by the third council at the time.
Councillor Crossan.
I can speak to it very briefly because it sings up, for example, in Gladesville, where you have all these individual developments going on, and there's no one way to access parking and driveways safely and sensibly. So you just get this higgledy-piggledy mess everywhere. So if we put a condition on the developer that whoever comes along and develops that site needs to have right of access as well. For example, if we had done it on Gladesville Road, where there are 3 buildings and the Agricultural Society currently trying to develop, it just makes for smarter, smoother development and neater access all round. And it was in that we approved. It was the last thing we approved as a council.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, did you want to speak further on this?
No, Mr. Mayor. It's a reasonable explanation.
Anybody wishing to speak against? For? Against? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Our next matter is 4.5, report on legal matters.
Move the recommendation.
Moved Councillor McLaughlin, secondly Councillor Miles. Any questions, any queries? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. We move to 8.1, the financial reports, which we've already dealt with. So 8.2, consideration of special rate variation and exhibition of Council's IP&R documents. Councillor Williams.
Move the recommendation.
Move Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Crasso. Beat you to it, Jim. Any further discussion on this? Councillor Miles, do you like to?
Not going to make any friends here. Mr. Mayor, I'm not particularly comfortable with putting to the community, especially at this point of time, a 10% or the potential of a 10% rate increase. Option 1, the rate peg increase, I understand, and that's going to be mandated anyway. Option 2, well, there may be an argument if the backlog of community infrastructure isn't being dealt with appropriately. We heard in our briefing tonight that we still have residual monies from that rate variation that are applied to certain projects. Understand that completely, and the community should have their say on that special rate variation. But the third operational special rate or variation to the rates would increase the rate, Hunters Hill's rates by 10%. And I don't think that at this time putting a 10% rate increase to the community is a particularly good look, so I won't be voting in favour of putting all those three options. I understand the two options. I think that we need to have a bit more of a discussion about what community facilities that rate would go into. There are some in this report that I think wouldn't be appropriate to spend money on, especially as we assess our property portfolio and see what the future for that holds. But the three options, the third option being a 10% rate increase, is just not something I'm willing to support.
All right, thank you, Councillor Miles. And anybody wishing to speak for? Councillor Crussell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's really important that we as a council keep pressing forward with delivering as much as we possibly can to our community while meeting our ratios to remain fit for the future, or to remain a viable council. For a few bucks extra a week, I think our residents would jump at the opportunity to remain independent and have all of their facilities, roads and services up to scratch, with a really bright future ahead of us. So all that we're doing with this is, at this stage, putting it out to our community and asking them how they feel about spending a few bucks a week so that we can get on top of some debts while we're reviewing our properties and looking at our cost-saving opportunities and our future investments that might generate income. And I think for now that this is the best way forward. We're asking our community for their opinion.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody wishing to speak against? Councillor Collins.
So look, I certainly don't support the rate increase, and the main reasons are, first of all, we've got deficits as far as the eye can see, and this, even if we did get the 10% rate increase, my understanding is it's not going to fix the problem. We haven't really dealt with the real issues of trying to increase our revenue base and looking at revenue from other sources. And I can't be convinced to support a rate increase when we haven't done everything we can as an alternative. And I will come back to the library just for 1 minute. I know I always complain that costs too much money for us. At the beginning of the year, I thought we were in agreement that we would do something about it. Nothing got done. A committee was formed earlier this year, still hasn't actually met yet, and what's going to happen is by the time June rolls around next year, it looks as though we're probably going to end up having to renew. So I think it's now time for council to actually I actually think this is the easy way out, and I don't think it's right to do that. So when we've explored all other opportunities, then I'd be willing to entertain this idea, but not now. And also, I might just say that I know we've explained before that we have 3 years of community facilities levy that hasn't been spent. which is for over a year has been sitting there and it hasn't been used yet. And I don't think it's right to go and ask for more when we haven't spent the money that we've been given for this purpose.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. Councillor Cresswell.
Just a question through you, Mr. Mayor, if I may. Am I right in saying that there's nothing in this recommendation that says with doing this, we stop pursuing all cost-saving measures and opportunities to create revenue-raising opportunities?
No,
Okay,
we'll
just-
continue. I think Councillor Collins is saying that we still haven't put a lot of effort into looking at alternative revenue-raising sources, and that was an issue. And as a council, we probably need to do some further work in that area. I think that's correct. The library issue was the issue of the $700,000 we paid a ride, and we have to review that in the future. Ideally, we'd like to find a solution for that, of our own library space. I think that's what we'd like to do, and that's something we need to talk about as a council and find a good solution for it. I think that one of the places we thought that might go is into the Gladesville shopping village, and we thought that 6 years ago, but unfortunately it hasn't materialised. So obviously we need to start looking elsewhere. So any other questions, comments? Anybody want to speak for? Councillor Sanderson.
Look, I think that what we saw before the meeting shows that we've got a problem with revenue in the short term. Anything that we're likely to do in the long term to rearrange and improve our revenue base, that's going to take 3 or 4 years minimum to put into place. This has to happen in the meantime, there's no question about that. The other issue is, in selling this to our community, we have to explain things like cost shifting. There have been plenty of reports around about that and the impact that's had on local government. This one is just so clear that there's absolutely no other way to go but to go with this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Anybody wishing to speak against? For? Councillor Williams, thank you.
I have a right to reply and speak for it.
You can. I'd like to speak for if I could before you gave your right to reply.
I didn't get it right speaking, but anyway.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'll come
Well,
back.
I think you should proceed if
No,
right to speak.
No.
Councillor Cresswell made the motion.
Sorry?
Councillor Cresswell made the motion.
No.
Councillor Williams, did I second it?
I apologise.
To go back to the library, my understanding is we have to give notice by, General Manager just told me, June 2019. We've got to give years notice to 2020. So I guess you could say we're tied in until 2020, but we need to make a decision by the middle of next year. So to answer, just to clarify that for everybody. I think the cost shifting has made a big impact on us. The other thing that became very clear to us 6 years ago was that if we weren't fit for the future, that might be the perfect opportunity for the government to wind us up as a council. And I think we need to make sure that we are financially viable, that we have got a positive operating result for the year. And I think it's important to know that we've got some money in the bank that we can use on things. However, it's the ratios that are likely to trip us up and cause the government to focus on us, in my opinion. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I agree with all that. And I'd just like to reiterate a couple of the points that were made. We talk about a 10% rate rise, but in actual fact that equates to $3.26 per rateable property per week, which is equivalent to $169.39 a year. I personally don't think that's much to ask of the community to give council an opportunity to provide the services and maintain its infrastructure to the levels that the community would expect. There's a long history in this community of supporting council special rate levies. As we heard this evening before the council meeting, that over 75% of the community supported the last round of rate levies. And I think that's an overwhelming endorsement of council to continue down this process. I also noted in that briefing that we fall in the fourth most affected council as a result of the cost shifting processes which government has been through over many years. We've been constrained through the merger process. We're constantly constrained through the rate pegging process. And I believe our community is entitled to do a bit of catching up. It's a modest catch up. It doesn't impact significantly on a person's rate bill, but it does give council an opportunity to deliver effective services and also meet its obligations to maintain facilities for our community to the level that they expect. I also agree that this is a short-term arrangement, as are all levies. Council will put in place over the next few years opportunities to improve its revenue base. There's a lot of suggestions around this table and maybe from the property committee to help us down that path. I think we have a bright future and we can work through a process over the next 2 to 3 years to get the income stream and generate the outcomes for our community. So I think this is a modest request. I will wait with interest to see what the community's response to it is, but I'd like to put it to the community to see what they have to say. So I commend the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Before I put the motion, we have another matter to deal with, time being 10:30. If you wish, we can extend for another half an hour. Councillor Williams, Councillor Miles, all in favour?
Aye.
That's unanimous, thank you. So I'll put the motion. If I might just have a point of clarification, although I said that we need to look at it as a council, I wasn't suggesting the staff haven't been looking for those other revenue raising opportunities. I think we as councillors haven't put our head together and worked on those together, and we need to do that. So I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thanks very much.
You're not unanimous.
Sorry.
Unanimous.
Can we have a names recorded, please?
Councillor Miles and Councillor Collins, recorded again.
Thank you. Jeez. You nearly got me, because
You're a bit
tired.
So we've moved to 8.3, which is... You be quick.
8.4.
8.3, proposed change to the council's code of meeting practice.
Yeah, 8.3.
Councillor Sanderson.
Yeah, that was the one I intended to go for. Yeah, look, I'd like to move an alternate motion. I'd like to move that the report be received and noted, and that council advertises the meetings for 2019 determined by the existing code of meeting practice.
Right. We'll just get your alternate motion up. We'll need to get another screen to sit here where you can see. It's my next sort of. Tunnel 3, is that?
Yeah, council receive and note the report. The council advertise the meetings for 2009 in line with the current code of meeting practice.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Williams. Question?
Hate to do this to you, Mr. Mayor. Amendment, if possible. I just wanted to note that on pages 204 and 205, under proposed amendment to Council Code of Meeting Practice, point 4, where meeting date falls within school holidays and meeting to be deferred to the following week. Point 5, no meetings to be scheduled for January each year. And point 7, in which a notice of the meetings of council and committees is placed in the newspaper, and the amendment being on council's website and Facebook page at least once per quarter, specifying dates, etc., etc., etc. That I think that those are worthwhile amendments to be put in to our code of meeting practice, and that they should probably be included. And if you are happy for that to be the case.
Well, could I make a suggestion there? The suggestion would be that I know Councillor McLaughlin has a suggestion for an alteration to the code of meeting practice. I would also like to see another thing that's adopted in Lane Cove and other places where the voting record on all issues is recorded, and along with that, so I think it'd be tidier if we were to just put all three of those into a single motion for consideration at a future meeting.
Oh, I'm fine with that.
Good. Okay, so where do we get to with this?
Sorry, I will amend my amendment.
Councillor Sanderson, it's his alternate motion. So
it's my amendment at the moment and not seconded.
So
we're
hold on. Are you willing to accept the changes that Councillor Miles has suggested?
I'm changing the amendment.
I think you're withdrawing it actually.
No, I'm amending the amendment that I made. The amendment I'm proposing now, forget the first one, is that the code of meeting practice be reviewed at a workshop and brought to a subsequent meeting.
Yeah.
So, Councillor Sanderson.
Yes, I'm perfectly happy with that.
All right, so let's be clear.
Good. Look, the first...
Hold on just a moment. Hold on. Too quick for me, you go.
Good time. Can't see how we could do all this in one meeting and not in 3 months.
So is that everything that you're suggesting? So this is Councillor Sanderson, you're incorporating this into your...
I'm happy for that to be there.
So is that what we've got there? You'll have to look at it for me. Too hard. Is that correct?
Yeah.
You ready to go, please, Councillor Fuller?
Yeah, point well 3 is now the code of meeting practice be reviewed at a council workshop and brought to a future meeting.
Meeting of council.
Meeting. Just give me a moment to make sure I understand. So is it this whole item here, proposed changes to Council's Code of Meeting Practice, or just the Code of Meeting Practice? Is it this whole item, 8.3, that we review at this meeting here? Is that what we're saying?
No, just the code.
Yes, or just the code?
Just the code.
Not this whole proposal here?
No, just the code.
Which would include some of those items and
Well,
other items.
it could do, but I know Councillor McLaughlin has a proposed change, as does Councillor Miles, as do I. So it would probably make sense to combine all 3 of those into a single motion.
At a later
On another day.
At a later date.
Okay. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr. Bear. Look, in going through this report, I did find an error, and that is that while the proposal would work next year, there would possibly be years where it would not work to give us sufficient meetings. Reason being is that the fourth day of any, or fourth Monday of any particular month might fall on anything from the 22nd to the 28th, meaning that if a school holiday fell
in that time. Potentially that would push that meeting into the next month. So potentially if we have no meeting in December, no meeting in January, we could also have another month where a meeting's deferred by the fact that we have a school holiday, and that proposal simply wouldn't work. So that's the first point. The other thing I'm rather concerned about, having a gap in our meeting schedule from end of November to the end of February. We had an extraordinary meeting on the 1st of February this year. I know we could do it again then, but the problem with extraordinary meetings, they generally deal with a single issue. At the present time, I mean, look at the time tonight, and we had a fairly light agenda at the last meeting, and we've had other meetings where we're struggling for time. So I really don't see that there's any justification at this point to reduce the number of meetings that we hold.
Thank you. Anybody wishing to speak against? Councillor Lachlan.
Yes, I'll speak against it. I think there is merit in moving to one meeting a month. I think in terms of efficiency, I think we could deal with substantive matters in a public meeting effectively once a month, and that would free up the other Monday for workshops and the other issues that our General Manager has discussed. I also think that the way council and councillors interact with the public is changing, and I think that there are other opportunities, and we've addressed those through precinct meetings. I think we need to be out and about more in the community, doing pop-ups and coffee with councillors and all of those things, and they're the kinds of things that where you get feedback from the community, and I think that's much more effective use of our time than going through monthly reports on legal matters, twice a month. I think it's incredibly important that we have public meetings. Of course it is, because we have to meet all of our statutory obligations. But bringing in the precinct meetings or the committee meetings we have, I think that's a really effective way of engaging with our community and getting really positive feedback that we can bring motions to council in a public forum. We're finding it difficult to fit those meetings in at the moment. Finding dates for precinct meetings were difficult, and I think that was brought about by the fact that we actually had Monday council meetings twice a month. So I think other councils have done it for a long time. They meet their statutory obligations. I don't think there's any complaints from their communities about when they have their public meetings. I'm not convinced that there's a lot of people listening to us on Monday nights. Hi, honey.
My son.
I supported this originally when it came up for moving to once a month meetings. It's not shirking our responsibilities in any way, shape or form. And I did have further amendments that I wanted to add to this recommendation, and that I'll just mention that, and that was what I circulated earlier, which was that we include a public forum in our public meeting, as do other councils, our neighbouring councils and other councils throughout Sydney. And that would be another way of engaging with the community and having more robust public participation in our meetings. So I support the recommendation as it stands. And if it was to come back up, if the amendment fails, then I would like to add a further amendment to it.
Very good. Would like to speak for the amendment.
Mr. Mayor, just to address a couple of things Councillor McLaughlin just said. No, I guess because of the new technology, not a lot of people are listening, but we just had a gallery of about 40 people in here. And 2 weeks ago we had a meeting, and 2 weeks before that. And it's now coming on 11 o'clock when we have to close, and we're not done with our items. Some of the suggestions Councillor McLaughlin made are wonderful. Having more precinct meetings, going out and having coffee with the council, that's fine, but we can do that on our own time. And I might suggest that there are alternate Mondays. There's another 2 Mondays in each month that we could sit down and workshop and do the work that is required of us as elected representatives. And I don't think anyone here at this council is going to shirk that if they're scheduled. I just don't see how we're going to get through, and I don't think that there is a lack of things to do I don't see how we're going to get through all of the agenda items that we need to if we cut our meetings in half.
Right, anybody wishing to speak against? For? Councillor Williams.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to deviate just slightly before I speak on the substantive issue. In this report, there's reference to local planning panels, and I just find the comments here a little bit off the mark in terms of there's only been 2 or 3 meetings of the panels. It's too early to know how efficient and how effective they're going to be, and the fact we've had no objections or complaints about the outcomes of those meetings is basically because they haven't had many meetings and there's only been a couple of items in relation to it. So I would caution being supportive in that way that is in the report there without having a reasonable amount of time for council to observe and consider the effectiveness and how those decisions align with our planning instruments and our community's objectives. Moving on to the other item, which relates to the planning process, meeting process. I just can't imagine, considering the meetings we've had this year, that we can condense the work in a meaningful way back into 1 meeting a month and then having 3 months without any council meeting. I agree with Councillor Miles and McLaughlin that there's plenty of opportunity for us to improve our connectiveness with the community and engage with them. But there are plenty of other days in the month to do that. And I support precinct meetings and a whole range of other initiatives we might put in place to make that happen. But I see this as a fundamental issue. There's something I've been on about before I got on council, and I've persisted with it since I've been on council. And I guess, Mr. Mayor, you know what I'm going to come to. And what we're proposing to do here, if we were to go down this original proposal, is to put a lot of our discussion and work into private workshops, secret meetings that council would be having that exclude the community. We fought very hard, or the year before last, to maintain our local democracy. The community cherishes that, and council has to be totally transparent, and it's something that I've argued for forever, that we have to enable our community to witness the information that we are getting, to hear the questions that we're asking, so that they're informed about the reasoning behind our decision making. And I don't believe the way council currently does it, and tonight was a classic example where we had a series of briefings, and fortunately one of those issues, which was the legal one, was brought into the council chamber so people could see directly what the advice was. But I think we leave a lot out of the process by having staff brief councillors, and I know there's supposed to be no discussion, but it inevitably heads that way. I think the community has a right and deserves the opportunity to hear the information that we as councillors base our decision on. So I think this would limit our local democracy and our ability to be transparent with our community. So I support our current process at the moment with some future amendments to the community, what's it called?
Code of meeting practice.
That's the one.
Councillors, we're running out of time very quickly, and we will run out of time if you don't keep it very short, Councillor Cresswell.
Just a question.
Question?
If I were to have heard Councillor Sanderson's debate and vote with his proposed changes, at the workshop, when we workshop it, firstly, it just says future council meeting, so that worries me because I'd like it to be soon. So I wonder if we could put a by date on that.
But my question is, if we advertise the meetings for 2019 and at that workshop we come up with some marvellous plan that suits everyone, that reduces some of our meetings, includes the community and does the work, can we then change that notice?
Yes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly, the code of meeting practice is available to be changed at any time. The reason for bringing this report forward tonight, or at the previous meeting, was to enable us to forward plan, I guess, neatly for 2019. But that option is always open to council. So if you choose to change the structure of the meetings or the frequency of the meetings, if that's the will of the council, that can be brought forward at any time.
All right. Do we need a right of reply, or we can just put? Could we just put this motion? Do you think? Do you think we've reached a point where we've got?
I believe so. Yes. I'm happy to forget it.
So I'll put the motion. Those in favour of Councillor Sanderson's motion? Those against? Thank you. We'll come back to that another time. We go to 8.4 and
Move the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams, and seconded Councillor Sanderson. Any discussion on this matter? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. 9.1 is a report on councillor briefings. Move Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor.
No.
Sorry, I was moved Councillor McLaughlin, seconded Councillor Sanderson. Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. 9.2 minutes of conservation advisory panel. Move Councillor. I missed it. Councillor Williams and Councillor Sanderson. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. 9.3 the minutes of the Levezenay Friendship Committee. Moved Councillor Crassoy, seconded Councillor Sanderson. Put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Is there anything else we need to deal with? Is there any further business? The committee we have for Levezenay, on the 25th of December in the morning, there's an error in one of the reports, there's a farewell breakfast or brunch for those students and it's actually the Hunters Hill Club, not the Hunters Hill Hotel. The Hunters Hill Hotel doesn't serve breakfast anymore apparently, so we've moved it to the Hunters Hill Club. You're welcome to come along. It's an interesting exercise, and I think we're sending 16 students to France, so should be quite a challenge.
What date?
The 25th of December, it's a Sunday, I think. November, sorry, November. Yes, not that day, November.
So could I just raise one matter as
further business, yeah.
Further business, and that is just to acknowledge the passing of John Collins, who was a former member of our finance committee. He passed away last week, and his funeral was on Wednesday. John was very, very active in council in previous years on various committees, and his wife Susan was also a very important member of the art committee. So I just wanted to.
I might also add there that he was the Deputy Mayor of Hunters Hill and on the council for 4 years.
That's right, and I'm sure there will be
We will do that.
mayoral minute.
There'll be a mayoral minute next meeting. So yes, he was a good man. I served with him on that strategy and finance committee for a couple of years. Yeah, good man. And he was also, was he president of the Hunters Hill Club?
He reinvigorated it many years ago. He did a lot in the community in addition to being a very successful businessman in the textile industry.
Right.
He contributed back to the community on a range of aspects, but most notably through his financial input to council and community clubs, etc.
Well, we'll get a chance to talk about it at our next meeting. So thank you very much, and I declare the meeting closed. Any questions without notice?
Yes. I'll hand them up.
Councillor Williams, thank you. Anything else? I'll close the meeting 10:55. Thank you, councillors.